I'd like to welcome you guys to this week's report. Got some good stuff to report for a change here. Had some stable weather and there's been good fishing. So a lot of things to cover before I do. This weekend's weather. I'm filming this on Wednesday afternoon. It's a little drizzly. Tomorrow's supposed to be more drizzle, a little bit of wind. Friday looks like it might be better. And then Saturday looks really nice everywhere. And Sunday looks a little windy at the outer islands. So, Rosa, Miguel, Nick, San Clemente, probably be windy. Maybe some of the further offshore tuna grounds I'm going to talk about here in a minute. But weather looks plenty fishable in most areas. That's good news. Anyway, let's head to the map and see what's happening. As I mentioned last week, we're coming off that pink moon, and it definitely had an effect on fishing up the Channel Islands. Boats started catching some sea bass. Also some nice halibut. I know the Aloha Spirit over the last few days had a really good halibut the other day. And today, Wednesday, they reported catching one sea bass and seeing a bunch more fish. So that's that normal springtime condition up there, which is great. That's where they're fishing those flukes and stuff like that to catch them. So hopefully we get another good year of that. Now, if you're going to try and get on that bite, your best bet are to be on the new and full moon cycles there. If you can only go on one, I'd go on the full moon. If you can't get out on the full moon, I'd go around the new moon. A couple days either side of it is a pretty good bet that you got your best chance of catching those fish up there. They might bite the rest of the time as well, but that's usually the better fishing's right around that time. Also up there, the calico bass are biting at Santa Cruz Island. Both Larry Heron and Scott Summersgill were up there over the weekend. Looks like they had some really good fishing for some quality calico bass. I guess it might have been a little tough to find the right conditions, but once they did, they loaded up on them, which is great to hear that's happening up there already. The rock fishing around the Channel Islands is good as usual. Boats fishing Rosa or Miguel are doing the best on quality. There's good fish at Santa Cruz Island. The Aloha Spirit got a few nice reds I saw. I'm probably sure they got a lot of them I saw in their Instagram post. But if you want to fish cod, I'd probably run it to Santa Barbara Landing and jump on the Stardust or one of the other boats up there, and because they're closest to the best cod fishing up that way. And but again, check the weather before you head out, because even though Rosa's not too far away from Santa Barbara, it still can be pretty windy up there this weekend. So definitely take a look at that. Heading down into Southern California here, I call that northern Southern California, I guess, for lack of a better term. San Nick and SBI, I don't know if anybody's been at Nick. I know that the Eldorado's probably online to run out there if they get decent weather. But it's been pretty windy out there recently, and I don't know of any coverage. I saw the Navigante out of Redondo Sport Fishing is running overnight trips and had some sea bass and halibut, rockfish, and that kind of makes me wonder. It's not wonder a whole lot, but they're probably fishing at SBI. So that's really the best landing to go out of if you want to go fish SBI. Most of the boats aren't going to run up there. But I would check out the Navigante out of Redondo Beach Sport Fishing if you want to get on one of those trips. But they don't call it the dirt clod for nothing. It can really suck up there out of the blue. So just be ready for disappointment if you go to SBI. San Clemente Island, it's opening up again. The Coast Guard Navy seems to be done with most of the nonsense they were doing there. So Saturday and Sunday both look open for most of the island, which is good because there's boats going to be running out there. I know the Thunderbird's been going out there and struggling to find fishable area they don't get kicked out of. So now they'll be able to stretch their legs a little bit. And with the good weather, Markland was saying that he might go look for some game fish in the mornings before rock fishing, which might be a shot at some yellowtail or halibut or sea bass. I don't know why they wouldn't be at the island. There's squid there. So, check him out. He's usually the best boat to go on this time of year because he's one of the few boats out there, the Thunderbird out of Davies. And again, they're having great rock fishing. They're fishing deep and they're getting big reds. So if you go out there on any of these boats that are fishing rockfish nowadays, I would recommend bringing at least 16-ounce torpedo sinker. I like 24-ounce, 30-pound Dacron. You get down quick, you be straight up and down. Don't mess around with like an 8 or 10-ounce sinker. You just got to drift back and get everybody tangled up with the current. So Heading into Catalina Island, there's some sea bass there, there's some halibut. My friend Mitch was running the Blackjack, which is a new 6-pack charter boat out of Davy's Locker. On an open part trip, they had 5 sea bass up to 20-something pounds, I think, earlier in the week. He said he saw a good sign in a few areas. Water's still real cold, but the fish are biting. So I would expect to see more of that this weekend. You know, these overnight boats running out of, if you want to go on an overnight boat. I know 22nd Street has a few boats. I know the Pride was out there the other day, had some sea bass, and just check the schedules. I don't really keep close tabs on the sport boat stuff, but check out your favorite boat. Maybe head out there this weekend if you want to go to Clemente or go to Cat. And if you're looking for a 6-pack boat, I can tell you what, that Blackjack, I'm not affiliated with them in any way, but the guys that run that boat are top-notch captains, and Mitch, the guy who normally runs it, he comes from a half-day and 3/4 day background, but he's run a lot of yachts and he's a really fishy guy. So maybe give him a try if you're looking for something different. Again, so at the island, they're still catching good rockfish. They're having to fish deeper, and I know that the Gale Forest, they're getting all the different kind of rockfish they don't normally get now, the big chilies and the widows and all the different cool stuff. So it's something different, and you can actually, since you can keep these little fish now, you're not just going home with 4 reds. You can catch 4 reds and I think 15 fish total, plus a couple of lingcod if you catch them. But yeah, a lot of this stuff going on. Should be great weather this week at Catalina, so if you want to get out there and do that, I'd jump on your favorite boat or take your own boat out there and use the relief shading stuff to find some spots of your own. So on the beach, I fished twice this week. I fished Saturday with Chris Oakes and Scott Smith down at Dog Beach in Huntington. We're right after the full moon, so we weren't expecting a whole lot. We went in and cranked one of the inside rigs there. Got a few calicos doing that right before it got, the sun broke the horizon. Usually that slows down dramatically after that. So we went into that Dog Beach area and fished in, I don't know, anywhere from 12 to 25 feet of water. And it's a whole lot of structure. I've talked about this in the past. That's what we call that superstructure. We have to go drive around to find fish. So what we found was the areas that we got bit, we'd see bait balls on the, we have the side imaging. He's got a Humminbird fish finder, so we got the side imaging out, 100 feet. And we're just driving around slowly looking for areas with bait. You find some bait on the side imaging, cast towards that. We were tripling up on calicos and sand bass. No big fish, maybe 2.5 pounds. But they were biting the axe blade, Daimiki axe blade. They were biting the Gulp jerk shad 6-inch. And they were biting like a little 4-inch Kitech swim bait on the Viking head. Didn't seem to be preferred bait. When they'd bite, we'd all three of us would hook up. Chris went back down there with his son on Monday, and Cameron got quite a few fish. Caught this one on one of the rods I built for Chris, which I'm pretty happy to see a young man have some fun with that. Got that on a Daimiki axe blade, and Monday was a great day to fish. I worked in the morning, and then at 1 o'clock, me and Matt ran up to PV. Conditions up there were tough. It was 54.9 degree water, mixed current, some uphill, some downhill, some no hill. And we had to drive around a bit to figure stuff out. But we eventually, so I posted on Instagram that I was going to talk about this a bit. So, basically when you go out to fish Palos Verdes or somewhere like that, anywhere really, there's a lot of kelp and a lot of it has nothing in it. So you need to really drive around and look for differentiations that might indicate that there are fish there. And I'm going to do a Bight Fishing Academy on this down the road, but here's a little quick one for you guys if you're heading out this weekend. We look for stuff. We look for favorable current direction. And then once we get into an area that's got favorable current, and by that means the current's running up or down the beach, and I've actually got a leading edge of a kelp bed that I can take a look at, and I can see is there birds there, is there bait there. All the kelp looked pretty generic on Monday, but we ended up finding an area off Trump National Golf Course there where there were a few birds sitting in the water. There's no activity at all, but the only birds we saw the whole time were sitting. And they were sitting right above the leading edge of a kelp bed and right beyond the leading edge of a kelp bed, which indicates that they're sitting there for a reason. They're not currently active. So we went through there and we threw service baits, got no response, like a weedless swim bait, a jerk shad on the sled head, but just speed winding on the top. So that's usually my first approach. But at 54 degree water, they're not always feeding on the top. So these birds were sitting in, I would say 12 to 18 feet of water. So the next bait that's realistic, something we could power fish, is a crankbait or like a DD100. So Matt threw the crankbait in there. I mean, it looked good. The birds were sitting there, but we didn't see any fish at all. He threw that crankbait and immediately hooked a fish. So I grabbed the DD100, took a few casts, I hooked one, and we caught 3 or 4 fish. And then because the wind direction, we were drifting too shallow, so I pushed the boat out a little bit. And then once we got out of that like 18-foot stuff, there was no more fish. So these fish, I think, because they'd been feeding on grunion in the area, were keyed in and located in that 12 to 18 feet of water. And there's boiler rocks coming up to 3 or 4 feet in there, but I would say the predominant depth is 12 to 18 feet. Now these fish are not feeding on the surface, and I'm not going to drag a swim bait on the bottom, so I have to find a lure that's going to get me within the bite zone of these fish. So and Matt's crankbait probably runs 10 feet. It was a Evergreen CR16, probably runs 10 feet in that condition. My DD100 is maybe running 5 or 6 feet, but that was enough of a depth change. So instead of having the bait running at 1 foot, getting a bait down to 5 or 6 feet made the difference and got those fish to activate. They're not necessarily laying on the bottom, but they may be hanging 10 to 12 feet down, and they're not going to come up 10 feet or 11 feet to see a bait, but they'll definitely come up 6 feet to it. And we were able to take that apart for a while. We got several nice fish. I didn't take a whole lot of pictures. I took a picture of the first one Matt got, and I got one probably 6.5 pounds I took a photo of. But I released several 4-pound fish, a bunch of 2 to 3 pounders, and then a sea lion came in, and we ran that zone 4 or 5 times. We got them every time through there. But we had to be in that specific depth, and we had to have lures that ran a lower thing. We tried to switch up the weedless swim baits when they were biting good, but they would not come up that extra distance. A sea lion eventually got in there, and then the bass quit biting, so I just drove down the coast until in 12 to 18 feet of water. And I got to warn you guys, there are dangerous spots in that depth range. So if you're not familiar with it, take it easy and make sure, look at your chart. The things are on there, but you can very easily hit something if there's a big swell. So I just cruise slowly. When I say slowly, I'm going maybe 10, 12 knots. It's just sparse kelp in there, and I'm watching what's happening ahead of me. And then I see a couple of seagulls sitting on the water up ahead, so I slow down to see if they're going to do anything, and then a cormorant pops up that had been diving right in that same spot. Makes perfect sense, just like what was the other thing. So we pull up to that one, had the exact same fishing again. Good fishing, but if you got any deeper, there were no fish. And if there were no birds, there were no fish. We found 3 spots like that before we ran out of water. And I'd say in 2.5 hours, we probably had 40 plus fish, at least 40. But there are many times where I've gone up to PV and not thought critically like that and caught nothing, or caught 1 or 2 fish. So I guess the rule is, you're looking for your Goldilocks zone where these fish are going to be. This bed's just right, and then your lure is the porridge. This is too hot, this is too cold, this is the right temperature. You make those connections, and you can get fish to bite actively even in really cold water. So I'm not going to say too much about that because I got other things to say, but let's head down to San Diego. Finally getting a little more coverage out there over the weekend, and in the last few days, I know the Pacific Queen got on some fish a lot closer to home. I'd say less than 70 miles from the dock. Limits of bluefin. They're getting them at night, but they're also getting them up during the day. One of the deckhands on there posted this Instagram video where their fish are up boiling. Guys are hanging fish. Looks like exciting regular bluefin tuna fishing to me, but we still don't know where all the fish are and where they aren't. Those fish that when there's only a few boats out, these guys run to known banks that hold these fish. Kind of like I talked about in my understanding the offshore water thing, in my SoCal Bight Fishing Academy thing, but they go to these known spots. So they're driving on a straight line to and from because they're going a long distance, 70 miles is pretty far to go. And so with each extra boat that's out there, we get a little bit more coverage and a better idea of what's out there. So we saw fish at 170 miles below, tighter to the beach. Now we have stuff that's between 50 and 70 miles, but off the beach. So I can't believe that those are the only 2 spots to fish down there. I think that once we get some more boats off the dock, we're going to find a lot more bluefin tuna than we know about. And if we get the spotter plane up on the right day with good weather and maybe in an afternoon when these fish might be up on the surface, who knows? But if you're heading on a trip this weekend, should be fine weather-wise. at least on a sport boat. I don't know if it's skiff friendly out there, but yeah, it looks like the night fish are still on the knife jigs and slow pitch jigs and stuff like that. The daytime fish, you get them on sardines and like cold sniper type things and different lures like that. But yeah, that's it. A lot of stuff happening. I don't know what I'm going to do this weekend. I may fish the Balboa Angling Club Lily Call tournament. If Jimmy's off work, it's a 4-pound test tournament in Newport Bay, which sounds crazy, but it's a lot of fun. Or I might just fish out front again. I'm not sure. But if you get out, I hope you guys have good luck and you all have a good weekend.